Alright guys, another quick one, knives. I think Terence was asking questions and a few others. Obviously I'm not a professional chef anymore, so I don't keep the same mass selection of knives that I used to have, but I do keep a few that I use for different things. I tend to prefer these global brand knives. I like them because they're light. Now, there's some professional chefs that'll say to you, oh, you know, global's for beginners. Well, that's exactly it. They are really easy to use, quite user-friendly. They will blunt quickly. I don't even know if that's an actual word, but because they tend to be as soft as steel, so they sometimes do need a bit more care, but I find it's easier care, particularly because you can get the, I think they call it the minnow system. It's like a ceramic rollers, water and the like. Anyway, so the main ones I use, that's essentially my little, I think it's a 17cm cook's knife. The idea is, you know, I'm sort of using this for the stuff that I kind of want to really get in there. So things like paring out a tomato and the like, I'd use that for. Then I've got the good old-fashioned cook's knife. It's what most people identify as your chef's knife. I genuinely think you can just about do everything you could ever possibly need with a knife with one of these. Right down to boning, all of that. It's not going to be as perfect, but you will get away with it. Very sturdy knives. The back of them is quite dense too. You can use it to break things. You can use it to break through bones. A good firm push down with a sharp knife will go through most things. So those are my two most commonly used knives. If I'm doing a lot of veg, you know, big things like pumpkins and the like, and you want that sort of more stable push down, that's just your standard sort of veggie knife, veggie cleaver. Not quite as big as a full cleaver, so I wouldn't be trying to fully smash through bones with it, but for a lot of that heavy veg work, and even because of the sort of shape of it, it's a lot easier to sort of go straight down, which you don't typically tend to do all that often anyway. And then ham slicer, for roasts and the like. This I was actually using back when I was professional, and the amount of roast I've sliced with that is absolutely brilliant because you've got long, nice strokes, and it stays quite, yeah. And it's also handy as an emergency spatula. When it comes to keeping knives sharp, I think most of us outside of a professional setting, you're dreaming if you think you're going to keep it as sharp as the day you bought it, but you can keep them, you know, insanely sharp. Most of these, you know, I've gotten a little bit lazy with, but they'll still cut through most things easily. What I'm going to do though, I guess show you quickly how we use the steel. I'm probably still a bit out of practice, but that is a ceramic steel designed for these sort of softer metal knives. It's not as abrasive, whereas this is your traditional diamond steel, so it's actually quite abrasive. Now, if you were to just use one of these, you are going to be very sad when you start to develop a bow in the bottom of your knife, depending on how you go about it. So this is designed to sort of almost strip a teensy bit off your knife as you go. So as you're coming down the knife, you kind of want about a 45-degree angle, and all you're doing is setting your whole blade against and pulling down in smooth motion. You see some people there and they're going a million miles an hour. It's really not necessary. If you're not comfortable to do it like that, feel free. Don't point this at anyone. Talking to you, Maisie. Point the knife away from yourself, going towards a bench or something like that, about a 45-degree angle, and just straight down, and then vice versa. Okay? Now, speed doesn't particularly matter. Good long strokes, whole length of the knife, running it down, that's what matters. Alright? Now, with your diamond steels, you don't want to overdo it. You don't want to do too many runs over because, as I said, you are actually stripping a tiny layer off the knife. Your ceramic steel is much the same, except it's more of a polishing surface. So when it comes to sharp blades, what changes whether a knife is sharp anymore or blunt is if you think of the metal as a straight thing, it starts to get little dents and little wobbles in it and the like. Not exactly visible, but the idea of steeling them is you start to straighten that out. So with the ceramic steel, it's more polishing that surface, bringing it back to a nice, neat, sharp. And again, just giving it a few runs. You don't need to run over it a million times. If you've got a half-decent knife and a decent steel, so that's perfectly sharp. After you sharpen your knife, always give them a wipe because you'll have little, you know, particles left on it. And your steels you should wash fairly regularly. with cutting things, I guess, people are so scared because most of us have blunt knives, okay? So when you got a blunt knife, you got to get through anything, whereas a nice sharp knife just goes through things like butter. Like, I'm not even trying there, and it's just straight through, alright? When it comes to actually cutting things with a knife, one of the things you've got to remember is let the knife do the job. Like, so first things first, curl your fingers under, make a flat surface, alright? The worst you can do, clip the knuckle. Use the whole length of the knife. Don't just use that bit and push down, because you're going to get nowhere. There's not many knives that are designed to just push down and cut things. Apply a bit of pressure and then move the knife. Let the knife actually do the cutting for you. You can do the old rest the tip and push through. The tip doesn't have to leave the board, and you just slowly but surely work your way along. The hardest part about doing it that way is actually learning to kind of crab walk your hand backwards. It takes a bit of practice. If you're really worried about where your fingers are, one of the things, so I've been teaching my daughter how to cut. One of the things I've got her to do is literally just form that, okay? And then all you're going to do is sort of bring it up a little bit. So like that, and then all you're going to do is sort of bring that down. So you've just got enough to grip onto, and you can just rest your blade against the inside there. Now for me that's uncomfortable. I've got a different way of doing it, but it's a good way to start, is if you're thinking sort of that kind of a, you just want to have a nice flat there, something you can't cut yourself, see? There's a couple of different types of cuts, I suppose, and often when I am talking with you guys I'll say diced. And diced is simple, so as you saw I cut lengthways, and then all we're going to do is sort of come across it, okay? Now, what you're kind of hoping for when you're dicing something, about 1 centimetre by 1 centimetre. Nice and simple. And that's perfect for like a mirror plier or the like. What I did and chopped there, I'd probably, I don't know, use for maybe a shrimp cocktail if I wanted to look like I was from the 90s. When it comes to cutting things finely though, one of the things that we often do is, how do I word this? We kind of overthink it. So really don't, if you're going to cut something like say celery and you want it really finely diced, chop it down into small workable bits, grab a hold, and just as best you can, cut yourself some nice small strips like that, keeping your fingers and thumb out of the way. And there we go, we've got some nice strips, right? This is where that resting the tip and let the knife do the work. So just push down, and you're only moving it sort of tiny little increments as you go. And what you end up with is obviously a much finer dice. I always feel like we don't ever do that. That's how you blunt your knives. Lazy shame there. I think we sometimes overcomplicate it with knives. We panic too much because we're worried about cutting ourselves. You cut your finger, it's going to sting for a bit, it's going to bleed, it's going to suck. But kind of not the end of the world, and you're less likely to do it with a sharp knife. Okay, because as you can see, literally, that's all the pressure I'm applying. Again, you know, whereas if you've got a blunt knife, bear with me guys, I'll show you the difference. Blunt knife. Hear that as it finally breaks through, that crunch? Alright. Now, that's the amount of force I'm having to apply. Now, if your knife's even remotely sharp, but blunt enough that it's useless, what's going to happen is you're applying that much pressure. If you do slip, the amount of pressure there, you will put any knife straight into your skin. Much, much worse than you're coming across nice and lightly, and caught my finger, it's a bit of a cut, that's all there is to it. Alright, the worst knife injuries I've seen have always been with a blunt knife. Guys, try and get yourselves a decent knives. I know they're expensive, but when it comes to, I guess, cooking, think about it like this. If you have a nice big joint, like big whole rump, you can buy them for about $9 a kilo, and they're a lot easier to cut up with, say, a nice proper sharp knife, as opposed to paying a butcher $26 a kilo for pre-cut meat. Alright guys, chat to you later.